I set my observability type to generation, and then I can just update the type of generation that I want or the model that I'm tracking right here. Right now I'm using GPT-4o. I can change that to GPT-5. I can come back to my observability dashboard and instantly see I'm saving 80, 90% of token usage per API call in my agent. That's huge. I'm just starting to build my next AI agent. It's going to be an agent that helps you learn to code. What I want to do is I want to aggregate APIs from over the internet that have already been created by other providers, pull it all together, put an agent on top of it, and allow you to interact with the agent in whichever way you want, whether it's a prompt or maybe a web interface. The first thing I need to do is start to pull all of these things together. And because I am relying on so many different parts and different services, I want to make sure that everything is reliable. Once I push things into production, it should continue to operate the way it works. Now, this is one of the tricky areas that I'm seeing very often with AI agents is the notion of reliability. As you start to build these agents and they require interactions with other services, how do you take advantage of everything that is there and make sure that it is reliable and continues to operate the way that you designed it? Now, when I think about building reliable agents, I think of 4 areas. First is creating a clean contract between the APIs and services. Now, I rely very heavily on Postman to do that. Second is I want to make sure that those APIs and services are available. Now, I'm going to be leveraging a number of services from third-party providers that I always don't have control on, whether it's up or down or the responses or anything that has changed. I want to make sure that it is available, and if something does change, I know about it and I handle that. Next, I want to make sure that my responses are consistent. Now, this is a large area that is really evolving with inside AI agents and LLMs. You ask an agent a prompt one time, you get a response back. You ask the same prompt, you may get a different response back. I want to get as close as possible to a consistent response that comes back, and I want to be able to validate whether it is a good response. You'll hear me talk a lot about agents and evaluations as we go through this. Now, the very last thing that I look at is observability. I want to know what the agent is doing, how long it's taking, and most importantly, is the context efficient? Is it burning through tokens, or do I need to look at ways to improve my app and my process? Let's start inside Postman. As I said, I'm going to start to wire together a number of APIs to build my agent. The first one that I have is a pretty simple get coding resources here. I can hit my send with inside here. I've already added it and see my responses coming back. Now that I've had it already wired inside of Postman, I want to make sure that that contract is clean. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be aggregating quite a few different APIs and services. So what I can do is I can take advantage of agent mode and say, create an API spec for this collection. Right now, there is only one API endpoint in here, but I can regenerate this spec every single time as I create it. Okay, agent mode with a single prompt has gone and created an OpenAI spec for me to take advantage of this. Now that I've got my spec up and going, a few other things that I want to start to look at. In particular, if I have more than one person on my team and I start to collaborate, I want them to know what this API and service does as well. Oftentimes, third-party providers won't provide sufficient documentations, or maybe that I'm writing my own API and I want to share that and make it discoverable with inside my organization. Documentation is a good place to start. As a developer, sometimes I don't spend the appropriate time to build that, but with agent mode, all I have to do is add a prompt and say add documentation. Give it a moment, it will go off and create the docs for me. Now that's already finished, I can go right to my collection, see all of the documentation that's been created. I didn't have to do a single thing, but add a prompt. Now this is great. I've got my documentation, I have my specs. I want to make sure things continue to work correctly. Now, often I've seen people when they're building agents, they'll start to add tests inside agents, but if your APIs go down, how do you know about it? How do you manage it? Not a problem inside Postman as well. I can very quickly say, create tests for this endpoint. I already have 2 tests inside here, but I want the agent to create a few more for me. Let me approve the changes. And in a few seconds, you can see it's gone and added a number of tests already. So it looks like one of my tests failed. Let's see if we can get agent mode to fix it. Have a look at the failed test and ensure it passes. Okay, I've gone ahead and added agent mode to make sure that it was fixing this regex. That was the problem previously, and it's gone and already approved it, ran it again. Everything passes successfully. Now I have all my tests correct. I want to make sure when I start to push things into production, I know that everything is working. The best way to do that is add some monitoring. Okay, I've worked on making sure my contract is clean. I have documentation, I have an API spec, and I've started to lean into the second area of reliability that I like to focus on, which is availability. You've seen that with the test cases. I know if I run them, everything works correctly. I also want to make sure that when things are running, they are performant. Is there bottlenecks? Are there errors coming through? And a great way to do that is insights and monitoring with inside Postman. I'm going to jump back to agent mode here and say, create monitoring for this endpoint. And at this point, it's created the first monitor for me. I have to go and run it. And you'll see here, not the most exciting report, but you can see the prompt that I ran before and the execution. So I know things are working and everything is going correctly. I can filter by types of executions, the run results, failures, errors. And as my server starts running and continues to run, I'll see more and more insights coming inside here. So everything is looking pretty good at this stage. So with a single prompt, I've added monitoring. So when my app goes into production, I can very quickly come in here, diagnose, say, performance issues, make sure that there's any errors or failures, and most importantly, make sure my application and my API endpoints stay healthy. Now, we're not quite done with availability. I have my monitoring up, but if you notice here, agent mode is starting to prompt me proactively for the next things that I want to do. So I could add more endpoints to the monitoring. For example, I'm working on another integration here, which is API testing. So let's go and add that one. Say, yes, please add the intro to writing test cases collection to the monitor. Here we go. Let's run this guy. Now we also have another one in here, and this is a great example of why you create monitors. A number of these are actually failing. So I'll need to go back and work on these at another time, but already the idea is starting to make a lot of sense in terms of how I start to manage it. I want to make sure everything I'm working on stays healthy. For the sake of time, let's just jump back to our coding resources here as well, because the next thing that I want to do is I want to say, please add alerts to the coding resources monitor. Great example, once it's up in production, I want to be alerted if there's any failures like I just saw in the intro to writing tests. Now, the next thing that I might want to do, so I don't get hit with errors like I saw within my monitor for the intro to writing tests, I want to start adding some proactive alerts in here. So let's have another agent mode prompt here and say, please add alerts for any errors that occur this endpoint once I learn to spell. So it's automatically gone here and added alerts as required. I didn't have to do a single thing, but add a prompt. So at that point, everything is looking pretty good. All right, we've added some API testing, some monitoring, some alerts, and our API spec to our agent. I think it's all pretty good from an API perspective. We want to take advantage of this API and the reliability that's built in there from Postman, and we want to create an MCP server that I can add to my agent. Guess what? I can jump straight back to agent mode and say, create an MCP server from this collection. Now, agent mode will go do its thing to create an MCP server, and each one of the methods within inside this collection will become a tool within inside the MCP server. Right now, there is this single tool inside here. It's gone ahead and created everything for me to export a package onto my local machine and run it using npx. I can go and have a look at the MCP server that's been created here. I can click on it and I can see the tools that are created. Get coding resources, in this instance, match to my HTTP method. All I need to do is download this, configure it inside my tool of the choice. In this instance, I'm going to use Klein, and then we can start to add agent observability and reliability on that side of the equation. I'm now inside VS Code where I've built my agent. If you'll notice here, I'm using the new OpenAI agent SDK. Makes it very simple to create conversational AI agents. If I scroll down to the bottom here, I have my actual MCP server itself defined based on what Postman generated for me. I'm running it locally on my machine here. But if we go back up to the top here as well, you'll notice I'm starting to add a few things from Langfuse. Langfuse is a really great open source project for observability. Now, when I think about reliability, there is a few things in observability that's really important for me. The first one is consistency. I want to make sure when I add a prompt, the response is always the same or similar enough that we're getting consistent results to the questions. And if you have a look at my agent that I've created here, it's a coding teacher agent with some simple instructions that you are here designed to help people to learn to code. Now, if you have a look at the actual agent definition itself here, it's a coding teacher that with a simple prompt and instructions that says you're a helpful agent designed to help people to learn to code. We're going to use the Get Coding Resources tool that is available on our MCP server to return a list of courses that are available. This is the MCP that I exposed from Postman, and I'm passing that in via the MCP server's parameter here. Now, once that's running, again, the thing that I want to focus on is consistently for that reliable service. And I'm going to use Langfuse to do that. I've added the observe decorator here so I can start to introspect via Langfuse. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start to use a number of scores. With inside Langfuse, I can score the trace on certain things. Is the length correct? Is it the same and consistent? Is the language that is used? Am I getting responses? And are those responses relevant? So every time I run it, it's going to measure this score. So let's go ahead and run it right now. And I'm going to say Python run. It's going to ask for the language. I'm interested in Python. Let's let this guy run for a second here. Okay, let's come back and run. I'm going to jump over to Langfuse console here. I'm in my dashboard. There's a lot of things going on here. A few just to keep in mind. The volume of traces that are running. So I want to keep a track of that. In this instance, I've run my agent twice when I've added scores. So we'll see 4 total scores. If you saw before in the code, I had those 4 different scores inside here. Every single time it's returned courses and returned 100% relevance. So if you look at the way that it works, it says a 2 here. That's 2 times 100%. So I know those things are working great. So from a reliability and a consistency perspective, things are looking really good. I can also jump into my dashboards here and make sure that things like latency are going well. Everything looks like it's right across the board. Everything is staying pretty consistent here. Time to models looking good. I'm not seeing anything that's jumping out at me that is increasing. Obviously, I have a very small load here, but from a consistency, everything is looking pretty good. The last thing I like to look at from a reliability is the broader observability area. And when I think about observability here, part of that is the scores and the tracing that we looked at before. But a very underlooked part of agent reliability is, are the tokens and the usage of the context designed well, or do we need to optimize? One of the hidden costs in building agents is token usage. It's obviously going to burn through the tokens. And if your prompt is broad, it's going to use more tokens. The context is going to be longer to find results. Now I'm using Langfuse again to take advantage of this. And all I need to do in order to add, say, token cost is change the observe decorator as type of generator. What I can then do is say, update the generation. So what this means behind the scenes is it's going to convert this into, as best as it can, an idea of token usage, and then actually go and look at the model's pricing sheets. In this instance, it's GPT-4, and convert that to a rough price of how much each one of my executions from my agent is running. Now, I run a couple of agents on my own in production, and this is a big deal for me as a side business. So I love to be able to actually have a look at the content generation and make sure that my token usage is actually good. So I've run this a couple of times already. Let's go onto my dashboard here, and I'm going to look at my LLM costs itself. So I can go and look at each of the executions, how much it cost me, the total cost per model if I had multiple models. So let's go back and convert this to GPT-5 and see the cost. I'm going to save that, GPT-5. And let's go run this again. Choose Python. So we're choosing the exact same prompt. And my results have come back. Jumping back over to Langfuse, let's run this again. And as you can see here, the cost on GPT-5 is significantly less than GPT-4. So now that I know my agent is running reliable, but more importantly, it's running at a lower cost. So I want to take advantage of this. I can see the actual tool itself that has been used and run. This is a great way to see performance metrics and data. When you're building agents for production and ensuring that they are reliable agents that run and scale as designed, there's really 4 areas that I like to look at. I always start with the contract of the API. That's the core of the service that I'm building, especially as you start to aggregate agents. The contract and the way that you can discover it and share it and leverage the OpenAI spec and ensure that it runs consistently is really, really key. Postman is fantastic for this, and that's always where I wrap it in. Once that I have that contract up and available, I want to make sure the availability is there. I add monitorings and I add alerts, again via Postman. So my core area and aspect is clean and consistent, and I know it's reliable. Only then do I flip over to building my agent itself. And that's where I'll use an observability tool like Langfuse to start to overlay trace duration, the scoring, to ensure that my prompt is returning consistent results. Once I have consistency and tracing, then I want to start to look at observability areas such as cost, ensuring that it's up and running as planned and there are no performance requirements. Putting those all 4 things together is the only way that you can build a reliable AI agent for production. So that's a summary of what we went through. I hope that helped everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.